Greetings and welcome to those that are visiting us to see another issue of A Sister Story. Today we have Sister Mary Jean Williams, who formerly known as Sister Vernon, and we are greeting her, welcoming her from Henderson, Nevada. So welcome, Mary Jean.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
This wonderful sunny day in Adrian. How is it in Henderson?
Oh, it's very sunny. In fact, yesterday it was 66. We had a little bit of a warm spell.
Yeah, we're supposed to get one tomorrow. Well, anyway, we are delighted to have you tell your story. And, we have 30 minutes. So it's a short time to get in. You're a jubilarian, to get in 60 years of your life with us as an Adrian Dominican, plus a little bit of your life as a member of the Williams family. So that's what we're going to focus on. So why don't you start, and you can start at the beginning of your life, where you were brought up, and your brothers and sisters, and a little bit of your family, and the values you think that you feel that you have incorporated into who you are, that you got from your family. So it's yours.
Okay. Well, my family's, both mom and dad's family, were from the south side of Chicago. And my mom was totally Irish. My grandmother had a little bit of an Irish brogue her whole life. My dad's family was English and Welsh. Dad had one sibling, Harold. My mom had 5 siblings, and they all attended St. Lawrence School, where our Adrian Dominican Sisters taught. And her only 2 sisters, Elizabeth, named Betty, and Noreen, who was my godmother actually, went to Aquinas and entered as they finished up at Aquinas, although Noreen worked a couple of years for the telephone company. My mom actually wanted to enter, but her younger brother, JJ, had been diagnosed as a brain tumor. So my grandmother asked her if she would stay and help her with JJ, my mom being the oldest. And she did, and then she met my dad. But my journey started in Roswell, New Mexico, because mom and dad were there. My dad was at the base in the Army Air Corps at that time, and I was born at St. Mary's Hospital on the Feast of the Holy Cross. So we traveled around from base to base in mainly Mississippi and Texas, and we went back to Chicago when I was about 2 years old. And of course, I was named after my mother, Mary. A lot of the people in our family are named for various relatives, and I was named after my mother. So when we got back to Chicago, my mom was praying that I wouldn't be an only child. And 3 years later, my sister Noreen, named after my Aunt Noreen, was born. And 4 years later, my sister Vernon, named after my dad, Vernon, was born. And then 3 years, not 3 years, but 2-year intervals, 3 times, my sister Patricia, Elizabeth, and then my brother Tom were born. So my mother was a very good prayer. I did not become an only child, not at all. My dad converted to Catholicism, and my mom's family was Catholic. So we had a lot of Catholic values and Irish and English and Welsh traditions that were in our family. And we lived next to each other. My mother's mother, my grandmother Nolan, lived in the 2-flat next to us, as well as her 2 brothers. So on Sundays, we would go to Mass, and then later in the evening, we would come over to Grandma's house and have our Sunday dinner. But sometimes we would also go to my dad's parents in Hyde Park and have a Sunday dinner with them. So my parents worked very hard to provide for our family and to let us go to both the grade and high school Catholic education. And my mom and dad, while they were dating, had actually gone to Cedar Lake, Indiana, which was a resort town about an hour from Chicago. And later on, I'll tell you that that actually became a little vacation place for us as well as our hometown in the future. So while growing up, we had a lot of fun in our family. We were very active. My dad loved to go to car races, and we went to the ice capades and the roller derby. We went ice skating and sledding, tobogganing. I preferred ice skating. That was my favorite sport. So we had a lot of fun. And then, of course, while I was in kindergarten, I went to St. Philip Neri because St. Lawrence didn't have a kindergarten. And my sister that taught me was Sister Antoinette, very tall, I thought.
Right.
But she was devoted to the missions. And she would have us collecting small change for the missions. So I would ask my mom and dad for some money, and then my grandmother rode the bus to her work, which is across from St. Philip Neri, so I could ride the bus with her, and I would ask her for money too. So it was actually about 3 months before they realized that I was asking them both for money. That put an end to my double collection for the missions.
Wise woman, wise.
So the next year, though, I could attend St. Lawrence School, and Sister Hilda Marie was the principal there, and I had wonderful sisters, 60 plus students in the classroom, same as in kindergarten. But I had Sister Helen Michael, Sister Sheila, Sister Bernadette Marie, Sister Celestine Marie, and they just taught us such a love of God, and they really gave us such a wonderful education, regardless of the number of people in the classroom. I mean, they really made learning so much fun for us. And after school, sometimes we would stop by the rectory. Believe it or not, the priests there were quite a few of them, it was a big parish, would come over on the playground at lunchtime sometimes and talk with us and play. Sometimes they were around in school. We felt comfortable enough to go there and ask them to listen to our spelling words so that we could pass our spelling test the next day. You can imagine that was a whole different kind of world from today.
It was back then.
Yes, it was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. And we had fun also in our neighborhood. There was an empty lot at the end of our street, and both the children and the teens would go there and play. Sometimes we would get together and we'd say, let's put on a play for the neighborhood, costumes and all. And then people would come and we'd have a chance to, render some dramatic play that we probably made up, and people sat through and wondered when it would be over. But it was just a wonderful, wonderful experience.
It seems like no matter where you were, there was a sense of community.
Yes.
I think, and you may be responsible for that too, I'm sure.
Right.
A
Yes,
value you certainly got from your family. Yeah.
Right, with just our extended family from the very beginning, yes. So in 5th grade now, we moved to that summer cottage, and I attended a school where I had to ride a bus quite a ways. It was Holy Names, but there were no Adrian Dominican Sisters there. But I did receive what I thought was a good education. My 6th grade teacher was just a wonderful teacher, but then we had to move to a bigger house because by that time we had 5 children. And so when I was going into 7th grade, we moved, and I had to get on a bus there at 6:45 in the morning to go, it was a public school bus, to go to the Catholic school. And as we arrived, our pastor, Father Hammis, would be saying the stations. We would go into church, and before Mass every day, he would say the stations, and then we'd go to our classroom, take a roll call, and come back for Mass. So my sisters and I and a lot of the students would go around and say the Stations of the Cross before school. One of the things that I'm very grateful that happened at school was I finally got to make confirmation. When I was in St. Lawrence's, I was too young. Then I left and went to Holy Names, and Bishop had been there the year before, so they only came every other year. And the same thing happened at St. Mary's. So finally in 8th grade, I was able to make my confirmation with my sister Noreen. And I took the name of Sister Catherine Marie, just the word Catherine, because I thought she was just a fantastic teacher. And little did I know St. Catherine would become so important in my life as a Dominican.
Mm-hmm.
But as we got to the end of 8th grade, Father Hammis would have a little talk with everyone. And when we were talking, he said, "Have you ever thought of being a sister?" And I said, "Well, I think I'll probably be a mother." But I actually had thought about being a sister, because I used to put a towel around my head and pretend I was one of the sisters that taught me in school. So there was no Catholic high school near us. If I went to the one in Gary, I'd have to get up 5 a.m, come back on the bus. And my mom said, "I know how you like to play sports." And she said, "You can't do that because I wouldn't be able to come pick you up. So if you'd like to go and live with your grandmother, who had moved like a couple blocks from Aquinas, you can do that." So I thought it over, and I thought, yes, that I really wanted to go to Aquinas, even when I was in St. Lawrence's. So I said, yes, I would really like to do that. So I did, and I connected with some of the girls from my classes in St. Lawrence, and of course, I made new friends. And we again had wonderful teachers there. Sister Rosaria was the principal. Sister Sabina and Sister Mary Jane were there. And the nuns, again, there had such a deep faith and really instilled in us a love of God, and really opened our minds to other possibilities of God. I had a very structured idea of God, I think, until I went to Aquinas. Then the idea of God became more real for me, I think. So we would stay after school and talk to the nuns there. Sister Mary Sabina and Sister Mary Jane. Very often we would talk with them. And we would also have opportunities to do community service. And there were opportunities to belong to other youth organizations in Chicago. And just really wonderful times there, just more community, actually. So while I was in my senior year in the spring,
So you spent all high school with your grandma, except maybe during the summers.
Right. Well, in the summers, actually, I got a little job in the summers, so I didn't really go home in the summers.
Oh, so that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. I was asked by a family if I would be a mother's helper when they took their children to a summer cottage in Michiana Shores.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I went home, very often on the weekends. I would meet my dad and then go home for the weekend. So I was home most weekends. And then while I was a mother's helper, my family would come to Michiana Shores. I had a day off, and I got to church on Sundays too. And they would come and visit me. So it was like going for a little vacation while I was away. So
a mother's helper was like a nanny.
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
So, yeah. At the end of my freshman, sophomore, and junior year, I was a nanny, and really met just wonderful other girls that did that. We would get together sometimes in the afternoons when some of the people we were watching would take a nap and go to the beach and just visit with each other. So I was accepted now in my senior year to Aquinas. To Mundelein, sorry. And then a few months later, these 8 girls announced they were going to Adrian and becoming sisters in our community. So I was celebrating with them. Actually, I had written some letters with some of my friends to enter other communities. And so I decided I'd have a meeting with Brother Kennelly, the vocation director for Chicago. I kind of dodged him every time he came. But this time I thought, I'll just meet him and I'll tell him what I'm doing. So I met him and I said, I'm going to Mundelein. I'm going to be a teacher, and I'm probably going to get married. But if I don't get married by 25, I'll enter the community. And he said, I think you should enter the community first. And then if it is not for you, continue along with your plan. So I decided that I think that had some words. So I went home and I told my grandmother that I thought I'd enter. She was not surprised at all. And then I called my mom and said, I think I'm going to enter. And she was delighted. But when I told my dad, he was not as happy. And for some reason, I don't know why, but it all worked out. And so a month later, we left for Adrian, and my siblings were crying because they thought they'd never see me again. And on the way to the mother house, Dad said, let's stop and have a good lunch. All your favorite foods.
Like you're never going to eat again.
So I said, okay, hamburger, French fries, and milkshake. That's what I'll have. And so I entered. There were about 101 or maybe so of us, and there were 33 other sisters in a group that we combined with, more or less. So there were quite a few of us that entered. And right as a postulant, I began my ministry in St. Joe, Michigan.
Oh, so you were sent out right away.
Yes, and I was to teach second grade. Now, it was a grade school and a high school. So there were lots of sisters there. Joan Delaplane and Mary Lou
Right.
Prufro were in the high school. Sister Anne Celeste was the principal. Sister Alice Carmel was my mentor, my teaching partner. And I had a blind student in my classroom. So I learned Braille. But his mother was awesome. She had typed in Braille every textbook. And probably this was maybe even the time before you could just really get those textbooks. She had done it on her own.
Wow.
And so Antonio was his name, would sit there and read everything we read in Braille. Then he had a typewriter, and he would type answers for me or questions or assignments that he could type. He did math, he did everything. So it was a wonderful experience, but one that I never expected right off. And then, of course, I had to go back to Adrian at Christmas time to start my novitiate. And just at the end of my novitiate that Christmas, my grandmother Nolan had an operation, and she died suddenly on Christmas Eve from it.
Wow.
And I couldn't go to the funeral. I was in my novitiate year.
She was almost like your second mother. Yeah.
She was. And for many years, I couldn't even believe she died. It was no closure to it. Didn't see her sick, didn't see the funeral. So that was something that I had to grapple with for a few years. But I went to Chicago just 3 days later and started my ministry there. So I had been in ministry in primary and intermediate grades and upper grades all along the way in many places that I taught in both Illinois and Michigan, and then on to California and even Arizona. Now I'm in Nevada.
Right. Many states.
So, yes. So in each of the schools where I had been in ministry, I would have what I called a family party on a Sunday evening. During the school year, I would teach folk dancing to the students as just a little elective, trying to do cultural dances with them, like maybe the Tarantella if I was with Italian people, and we always kind of did the Virginia Reel and just played a thing called bingo where you move to another partner and twirl around, and just simple little folk dances. And we would make silhouettes of the students and put them up. Usually we'd have a gym, and the parents would come in and find their child silhouette and sit there. And we have a small prayer service, and then the students would come out and demonstrate a folk dance, go back and invite members of their family. Then that group would go back and invite more members of the family. And we just really had a great experience. So many smiles from the parents and people saying what a good time they had. We were sometimes even in the newspaper, they would have somebody come and take a picture and write the story about the fun that we had.
That's good. Those are the things they remember. Yeah.
Yes, there are two ministries that I really would like to share. The first would be my ministry in the Diocesan Office of Catholic Education in Fresno, California. And for many of the ministries in which I was involved, I had a calling from someone. I really relate it to the Holy Spirit, but very often the invitation came through people. Mary Kathleen O'Neill invited me to consider being a principal when I was having the most fun teaching. And then Sister Claire Ann invited me to apply for this position as assistant superintendent when I was having the most fun being a principal. So I did. And the superintendent there and the women I worked with formed a faith community. We shared prayer and we planned. We were busy, but we had a wonderful time. And what was most life-giving for me was the opportunity to work with staffs and really develop their catechetical programs, and also to help them with accreditation, which improved their teaching techniques. Those were just very energetic, life-giving experiences for me. And then the other experience that I'd like to share is the experience at Regina Dominican High School. I was asked by a tractor to consider going there, and I did. I was the director.
Jean, you
Yes.
went there, but you had been teaching out west for how long, or been out west for how long, when you were asked to go to Chicago?
Probably 40 years I've been in California.
I mean, because that's a significant move for you. You didn't just happily, I mean, I'm sure you did it happily, but that's a significant move.
Right. Yes, it was. But I had taught in Chicago and been raised in Chicago, so I knew what was coming with the snow and the cold.
But that's, yeah.
I just wasn't used to it for many, many years. Although in California, I did ski and ice skate. I still got into those winter sports. So as I was asked to be that director of mission integration, I really was very grateful for an opportunity I had on a sabbatical back in the 90s when I finished my classes at the School of Applied Theology in Berkeley. I went on a Dominican pilgrimage, and that was a trip with other Dominicans to the lands of Spain, France, and Italy, where Dominic started the order. So I really got to imbibe that Dominican charism in a way that was unique. But in sharing that with the faculty and the staff, and especially the students there, I really delved more into our roots. And I think I learned even more in that experience. So each year I would plan some part of our Dominican charism as a focus for the girls, you know, and freshmen. And then especially for the staff. But I worked with a couple of campus ministers who were just fantastic and so filled with Dominican charism. And Sister Catherine Frazier was with me my last half a year that I was at Regina Dominican. So I really thank God for those two opportunities for ministry. But as I said, I really loved the teaching and being principal and other opportunities that I had also.
And it sounds as though you certainly were generous with your yeses when you were invited to consider, you know, moving to something else, or consider maybe you could do this or that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It really helps when we know someone believes in us.
That's right. And I would say my inspiration for my vocation really came from my mother. She really trusted me to take care of the younger siblings in my family. And then also my grandmother, she would sometimes, you know, give me little babysitting jobs that she couldn't do because a lot of people liked her to babysit. She was such a great lady with children. And so then I had that responsibility too. I would babysit for people, taking care of, you know, their children. So it's true. You do get more confidence as you do more things. That's how I felt with my teaching too. When I first started, I wasn't as sure about what I should do, and it kind of comes to you as you do it more often.
It's called maturity and wisdom, perhaps. So then you left Chicago and went back out west, and that's where you are right now.
Yes.
Henderson.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Go on.
While I was at Regina Dominican, we had summers off there, and I would come out here where my family lived in Henderson and volunteer in the hospital as a Eucharistic minister during the summertime.
Okay.
So that's really how I got to Henderson, really.
Okay. So that makes, now, we can't let this year of 2020 go by without seeing where you are and how has this year of this pandemic, this historical time that we are living in right now, how has that been for you? Or how is it for you? It's still going on.
Mm-hmm.
Are you learning anything about yourself?
Oh, yes. Yes, I am. I am an introvert, so I do appreciate quiet times.
Mm-hmm.
As I have been in so many different ministries, I've had to be able to speak in front of a group, and I'm not usually the one that likes to speak first, but when I know I have to speak in front of a group, I prepare, but then I depend on the Lord's help to get me through, because, an introvert, their strong point is not being, in front of a group like that, but I have learned that about myself, that with God's help, I can do a lot of things that I wouldn't necessarily raise my hand to do. So during this pandemic, though, we've had a lot of opportunities in many ways to really grow spiritually. Reading books like Who Creates the Future, and I just kind of finished up or am finishing up a book on St. Catherine of Siena, but just the retreats that we've had available from Weber. And from different organizations, the input that they've given us in a lot of things that are social justice issues have just, I've had the time to do that. I do miss, since last March, I haven't been able to go to the hospital as a Eucharistic minister. And I also volunteer in the Women's Center as an assistant to just do some clerical things for the senior peer counseling group. So I haven't been able to do that. But I'm also with my Sister Vernon, companion, who's going through chemotherapy, and I have the time to be with her too. So I really been very grateful for that.
Tell me, what are your hopes for the future? Tell us about that.
Yes, well, I've always been very partial in hope to the Dominican order and the future of women religious. And I know that we are going to see women religious very differently in the future, but we've always changed to the signs of the time. That's what I'm really proud of our community, where we look at what we can do and what we can do with others, and then we put all of our efforts into that. So I'm very, very hopeful. One of the areas that I had hoped I could work in and never had the opportunity was with our associates. And when I came to Henderson, there was a group of women here who were going through the associate preparation with our sisters, and they asked me to join the group. And I was so grateful to be able to do that. And just maybe 2 weeks before we were in this stay-at-home procedure, we welcomed 5 women into the associate program from out here in Henderson. And we have other associates that are out here too. So
yeah, I think a lot of the associates began out west. I mean, I think it really grew from the people out there.
Right.
That's good.
So that was something that I really was happy to be a part of.
Is there something about you that we don't know that we'd be surprised to hear?
Well, maybe this, that my grandmother, Nolan, was the cook at Aquinas. This is more about her than me, but for 25 years. That was the work that she went to across from St. Philip Neri when I was riding the bus with her. So when I'd be in Adrian, as a postulant, the sisters from Aquinas knew she was there, and they'd come by and they'd say hello to her. They were like her own children. She was just so happy. They were like family. And so I've had that family experience really since I was born, I think.
Do you have a sense at this point where the Spirit might be leading you?
Well, I think that once we can get out of this quarantine, I want to return to working as an Eucharistic minister.
Good.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's very life-giving too for me to work in the Women's Center. There are so many programs and outreach that we offer to the community, and it's great to be part of that. So I'm looking forward to doing that eventually. Now I've heard March, and then someone else said the other day it might not be May until we go back as volunteers.
We just live day by day and enjoy the day and learn from the day. That is, that's for sure. You know, you said something at the beginning. We can't really get into it that much, but when you were living with your grandmother, you said you had a certain perception of God, you know, from your family, but then your grandmother seemed to make God real to you. Can you just tell us a little bit about that? Because I'm sure you're at a different point right now.
Right. Well, my grandmother was a very holy person. She used to say her daily rosary, and I really think that's my vocation. And we had many sisters and priests in our family, and I think it was their deep faith and their prayer and their encouragement to really their children to think about serving God in that way in religious life. So she was an inspiration. And she used to go to Mass every day. I didn't do that in high school, except I had a group of friends who used to say to me, come on, you can get up a little bit earlier and go to church. So I did go sometimes, but I didn't go every day like she did. That was certainly an inspiration.
But you met God in other ways, and it sounds like in many, many people and experiences that you have had. It's very evident.
Right. And also, I think the way that religion was taught when I was in high school, when I was living with my grandmother, when Sister Rosario would do religion with us, she was the principal, but we had a lay teacher who wasn't Catholic, so then she taught religion class for us. But she opened up the idea of God as more human to us, that like that friendship you have with someone else, not just a figure that's more fatherly and distant. It was a closer relationship that you could have with God.
Well, Mary Jean, is there anything, words of wisdom, anything that you would like to say as we draw this to a close? I know it's rather brief to put in, 60, 70 years of life, plus your 60 some years, happy jubilarian, you are this year. But anything else that you want to say briefly?
Well, I would really remember something that was taught to me when I was actually at St. Lawrence's, and that is just a little phrase, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." When the story of Samuel was told to us, how he kept hearing this voice in the night, and then Eli said to him, "Say to that voice, speak, Lord, your servant is listening." I really think that that's been kind of a motto for me, because every time that I am going to consider something, I think of that phrase, because the Lord is always calling us to new things. So we need to be listening for what it is.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I just want you to know these recordings, besides going on the congregation website, they also go on YouTube. And we have gotten some very significant letters from people who just arbitrarily have turned on YouTube and have run into a story by an Adrian Dominican Sisters, and they have been very touched by what they have heard. Every story is different. So thank you. And you are preaching to many people today. So Vernon, that was your name, Sister Mary Vernon, okay, which took in your mother and dad's name.
Right, my mom and dad.
Okay. We always like to mention both names if you have two names, because some people only know you by Vernon and not Mary Jean. So thank you. Blessings on your ministry, and certainly we'll keep your sister in our prayers, and blessings to you. And may 2021 Find you with many blessings and much new life.
And thank
Okay.
you too for this ministry of yours
Yes.
and getting our stories.
Yeah, it's an experience,
Yes.
which I enjoy. All right, thank you, Mary Jean. We'll be in touch. Bye-bye.
All right.